Hello, I'm Robert, fact-checking for scared people. And this last video is about what to do. So in the previous three videos, the first video I explained using the very best analysis I could find from advisory body for the Ukrainian government, that there's just no way that Russia is going to invade and try to take Kiev. It's not a feasible a goal that it can achieve at all. And then the second video, I talked about how there's no way that NATO is going to be involved because Ukraine is not part of NATO. The US and UK have committed to support Ukraine and they can send net weapons there, but there's absolutely no way that they send actual combat troops there or that they fight Russia. This is, remember, Russia already invaded Crimea, at least that's how NATO sees it, and NATO didn't fight back, they just supplied Ukraine with weapons, and it's the same situation today if Russia was to do anything. In my third video, I talked about how it would really be counter to Russia's aims and proposals, even to their objectives, even to take over the Donbass region, which they could do very easily since they're already de facto in control of the separatist region of the Donbass area. And so Russia could tomorrow just send in a whole lot of army and they would be welcomed by the people there. There'd be very little resistance, and then they would then have annexed the Donbass region with very little fuss. But there's no way that they're going to do that because Donbass is Putin's ace in his hand. So both Russia and Ukraine maintain the fiction that Donbass is part of Ukraine, even though it's the government officials are paid by Russia. Ukraine has absolutely nothing to do with how it is governed. But if Russia were to take it over, and it's a symbolic thing, it would be the end of the Minsk Accords. It would mean that Russia had absolutely no leverage anymore into the Ukrainian government and their choices, and Ukraine could westernize with no restrictions at all if Russia did that. And Ukraine would of course protest and say, you've taken over part of Russia, but in terms of their own internal government, things would be far easier for Ukraine if Russia did that. So they'd fight back, but there's no way they actually would end up being in a better position, and Russia would end up being in a worse position. And then I also talked about if the even minor things would have major repercussions on Russia, and the one thing they could do of a minor nature is to embargo arms sales and arms deliveries to Ukraine, forceful, like inspecting the boats in the ships in the Black Sea, and even take over airports to prevent NATO from sending them weapons. But that would make no sense. If they wanted to do that, they should have done that a year ago, because Ukraine has already been supplied with many advanced weapons, the very ones that Russia would want to embargo if they did a forceful embargo. So it's hard to see of any military action that Russia could do that would benefit Russia in any way, and that wouldn't cause huge repercussions and problems for Russia. So I'd be extremely surprised if Russia is going to do anything military. They're just going to march up and down, and so I explained that it's like two stags fighting, and not noise and fury and signifying nothing. Yes, this is not my phrase, this is from William Else, who posted to the group about it, just redefining the boundaries. But they feel they need to do that, and so they're probably going to continue this. The United States has been saying that they're going to. The United States is basically in a war of words with Russia, and it's basically saying, how strong I am, and you've got to back down. No, you've got to back down. No, you've got to back down, and they're waiting for the other one to back down. And United States has been very forceful in saying Russia's got to back down. Russia is saying you've got to retreat all your forces, all NATO forces from the border regions, and both know that the other one is not going to do what they said. And so they need to find a face-saving way of ending this. Meanwhile, negotiations are going on in Europe involving France, Germany, Ukraine and Russia in so-called Normandy format, and then there's a shuttle diplomacy. Macron and Scholz, and they're all talking to everyone, and Zelensky is asked to wants to meet with Putin. I don't know if that's going to come to anything. So there's a lot happening in Europe, and there's much less of this polarization. It's mainly United States and United Kingdom that are making this very forceful claim that Russia plans to invade Ukraine. There's no way they really are going to do that. So, anyway, if you can watch my previous debunks, you can read this article, and then that deals with the rational side, the logical side of things. And hopefully, after seeing all that, then you will realize that there's absolutely no possibility, there never was a possibility of a world war, there's never a possibility of NATO fighting Russia, and Putin would basically have had to become totally irrational, completely out of character, because he never has done big invasions, and it makes absolutely no sense for him to do that. He'll always use minimal force, like the little green men in Crimea, and this would be a major mistake to even try to invade Ukraine. And as soon as he started, he'd realised that, but he'd realised that before, because he has good generals, and he's plenty of good advisors who would tell him these things. So it just doesn't make sense that he'd do that, and even the minor things, it's just downside for no upside, and he's just not of a character to do something like that. He doesn't do spontaneous in this sense of just doing rash, stupid things where it's absolutely certain you're going to lose out of it. So hopefully after watching those videos, reading my debunk, then you realise, so I'm not absolutely guarantee there's going to be no military action. It just seems exceedingly unlikely, and certainly no way that NATO is going to be involved, or any kind of world war, and if there was anything, it would be likely to be minor, but it's hard to see anything that Russia could do. It's based on the best military sources I can find. I haven't yet come across anything military that Russia could do that would actually benefit Russia. The nearest to it is this idea of an arms embargo, but then that horse is already bolted, closing this stable door after the horse is bolted. So that it really doesn't seem to be anything that they could do of a military nature. Obviously, to say if you know of anything, even minor, that they might do, but so far I haven't come across anything that makes any sense. Meanwhile, there's a very big prize for Russia, which is some kind of treaty or agreement giving improved security for Russia, involving probably Ukraine making some promise and the United States making some promise, and some kind of general treaty of some sort. And that is surely the prize that Putin is really aiming for. And it's also a prize for Ukraine, or for United States, or the rest of NATO, if they can come up with a good thing that they all agreed on. So, hopefully, after realizing all that, you have somewhat less anxiety. You realize there's no possibility of world war. Unless you're living in Ukraine, there's no possibility of you being infected. If you do live in Ukraine, then the chances are you are already paying much more attention to Zelensky than the United States, and you are also not scared either. You're just in a similar situation to what you've been in since 2013. So anyway, what can you do then next so first of all, I've got this mention in my debunk saying to the strategists and the mental health, if I could in any way influence them. So I don't do politics, but general, if there's anything that just to influence on all sides of this, then the journalists, the media story people, the politicians, and I know that Biden, when he became elected as president, he has a warm heart. He is concerned about the health, about medicine, about financial support for poor people and for people, especially sick people in the United States, and mental health care. He definitely cares about that. So it is very bizarre that he is saying this thing, which is causing so many of the people that I'm helping to be extremely scared, and some of them sometimes verging on suicidal. And this is not what he's about. So I don't think he can realize what he's doing. And if only somehow these people could come to realize. But then we've been working, as far as I know, there's nobody else who's showing much awareness of these issues apart from our group and my blog posts. If you know of anyone else or anything else, do say. I just haven't come across anyone who is working to fact check stories that scare people in the mainstream media, or that politicians say that scare people, specifically focusing on that and the mental health impact of all these exaggerations, all these false stories. So anyway, that's what I'm about. I'm not about the politics, about deciding who's right in Ukraine or what the final agreement should be, but just that everyone, please, please, please consider the mental health impact of precisely how you have done this war of words, this disinformation. There's no way that Russia believes that Ukraine is really going to attack Donbass. There's no way that Biden really believes that Russia is going to invade and attack Kiev. He has excellent generals. A five-star general would know far more about this than I have managed to be able to unearth by searching of the military analysis. They would know of the military analysis by the Ukrainian experts, and I haven't found any analysis anywhere that could explain it as being a sensible thing to do, or anything that could be done in less than many, many weeks. They'd probably still be trying to capture Kiev in March, April, and they still wouldn't succeed. And without a massive increase in numbers of soldiers, they wouldn't increase it. They wouldn't achieve it ever, according to the Ukraine analysis that I saw. It just not, and it would hardly. And even if they did capture the Parliament building, it's not. It doesn't mean that they are in control of Ukraine. So anyway, that's all that quick summary of what I've done before in the previous videos. So so then I want to talk about. I know I'll do this. I'll do this as a separate video because I want to do I think I probably better do a separate video about. So that'll just be. It's like when two stags fight. I'll do a separate video for that, and so that's the summary. And now I'll talk about the mental health, and I'll upload a separate video.